The former Labour leader will be one of a number of senior political figures, we're told, from progressive political parties and movements across the globe, according to Pretoria, joining their delegation. But he's not a lawyer. He's not an academic. He only achieved 2 A levels at grade E, which is the lowest possible passing grade, before he left school. I'm not aware that he's been in Israel or the Gaza Strip during the war, so it's rather hard to understand how his contribution will be particularly helpful to South Africa in this case against Israel. He is, however, the former leader of the Labour Party, who led his party to a spectacular defeat in the general election and saw the independent body called the Equalities and Human Rights Commission here in the UK deem his party racist against Jews. That body said at the time that there were serious failings in the Labour Party leadership in addressing anti-Semitism and inadequate processes for handling anti-Semitism complaints. So he's not necessarily the best placed person for an independent or fair assessment, perhaps, of Israel's actions during the war. And beyond Mr. Corbyn, the South African government didn't name any of the other worldwide political figures that it said would join the delegation.
OK, well, on the other side of the political aisle in the UK, the Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, former Conservative Prime Minister, has come under fire for his comments on the case.
Yes, David Cameron was addressing for the first time since he became the Foreign Secretary the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday. And he said he didn't agree with South Africa's accusations against Israel, but he was grilled by MPs on that committee very much in relation to what he did think about Israel's actions, whether it could be breaking international law. And he said if they were asking him if he's worried that Israel has taken action that might be in breach of international law because of this particular premises, he said, having been bombed or something along those lines, he said, yes, of course I'm worried about that. And that's why I consult the Foreign Office lawyers when giving this advice on arms exports. There he's referring to the idea that Britain still exports arms to Israel, something it hasn't stopped doing. He said that the legal advice he had seen was consistent with the fact that Britain has not changed its rules on exporting weapons to Israel, but he wouldn't say exactly what they told him. He wouldn't say if they told him Israel had contravened any rules, and he hinted that maybe there was a vulnerability for Israel in relation to proportionality that he was aware of from legal advice. He also commented that there are still 2 British hostages in Gaza. He seemed very uncertain about the number of hostages with British citizenship who had actually left Gaza. He said he didn't really know those numbers, which was quite extraordinary, and he was called up on that by one of those on the committee as well, saying that really that's something that the Foreign Secretary ought to know, ought to have at his fingertips. Certainly very different to how Israel and Israelis and Israeli politicians are treating every single hostage there. But David Cameron didn't want to be pushed on the hostage issue. He said, I just don't want to say any more. We don't have any information to share with you. So Britain perhaps still pushing diplomatically to try to get hostages back, but nothing public. Very little from the Foreign Secretary there about what Britain is doing in relation to those 2 British hostages still kept prisoner in Gaza by Hamas.
OK, thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan Sacerdoti there in London.